Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. Work continues on the Coupe, and we've had another change of weather, of course. I think I say this every March because, of course, on social media, everybody's screaming how hot it is here in Southern California. But as I've said before, it's always this hot, at least 1 week in March every year, and we just happen to be suffering through it this week. I've got a bunch of stuff to show you. I've stepped back away from the car, gave myself a solid day off, and I jumped back in and I'm taking care of the issues that we ran into at the end of last week's video, and come right back and I'll show you where we're at. So we are just hovering under the century mark as far as temperature wise here in the Inland Empire today. And it's hot, but it's not unbearable. So I'm not gonna complain about it. I actually enjoy the heat. Here's where we're at on the Coupe. We started last week with, I think, the power steering hoses and getting the power steering hoses from the rack up to the pump, and I went all through how I did that and how I got everything strapped in place. Where we ran into some issue was the coolant lines, the in and out of the radiator, and the cool tubes that we have chosen to use on this car. Now, if you're using that flexible, how do I put this? Questionable tubing that comes supplied with your kit, this probably won't be an issue because you can just go around all this stuff. But I had to redo this brake line right here. I managed to get this one, I rebent it so it came along the back of this support for the lower control arm. It used to be over here, and we just needed that space. I could have probably squeezed it in next to this one here for our crossover to the other side, but I felt like if it was going to reach here, I was just going to move it, and I did. So it's out of the way. All this stuff is tight, by the way. I've got it all back in, and I want to go over some assembly instructions for you in just a second. But what I did was I had to bend. It's just really hard to get the camera in there to see it. I had to put a bend on it to get it kind of around that tube. So if you see, whoop, right here where it joins, I came out and then back in towards the support there. So it's nearly flush with the tube. So maybe right here I can show you. So right here you can see it comes out kind of like a little shepherd's hook and then back in here right against this tube. And we needed that because our cool tube comes from right here to right out here. And it goes through this area right here, these two tubes. So it goes in there underneath the control arm and it comes out over here. So let me put the cool tube in there, and I think you get a better understanding of how that kind of goes in there. But to do that, I had to pull the horn out that I had just installed. So I've got to find a new place for the horn. And who knows, it may go right over here where Factory 5 has you put the horns. I just don't think it's close enough to the front that it's going to as loud as it should be. Anyway, I've got the battery tray back in. It's all bolted back in. I'm in the process right now of getting my fuel lines restrapped because I took all my fuel lines loose inside the tunnel right here when we made this panel right here. I had that the fuel lines coming out right in between the X's here. I've since moved them down so they're right there. And I'm going to see Dusty again this week. We've got some work to do over at the Ontario store, and so I'm going to have him make my 2 fuel lines for the front and my 2 fuel lines for the back. But getting back to the brake lines, I got that all back in, but here's what I want to tell you. And I've told this to the last generation, I guess, of Mark IV, Mark III, and Mark V builders. Do not assemble your brake lines, any line. Do not assemble any of your fuel lines. Do not assemble any of your oil fittings for your oil coolers, your transmission, all that stuff. Do not assemble them dry. You will never get them tight enough to keep them from leaking. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to lubricate the fittings, and in this case, the double flared ends of the tubing with brake fluid for brakes. Oil for oil lines. You use oil for fuel lines as well because gasoline is a solvent. It will not provide any lubricity in order to put the things together. What you're trying to do is give the fitting every chance not to leak. And so by lubricating both the fitting and the end of the line, the tubing, you're going to allow that fitting to tighten down tighter with the same torque that you would if you were doing it dry. It just gets tighter because it's got some lubricity. If you don't do that, what you're going to find is, especially if you're using stainless brake lines, first time you go to bleed your brakes, all your fittings are going to leak. And then you're going to go back and you're going to have to take them apart, put them back together. And funny, just taking them apart and putting them back together sometimes fixes the problem because now you've got fluid on the fitting and it allows it to go and tighten that much farther and it'll stop the leak. So I'm going to keep hounding this every time I deal with brake lines, fuel lines, oil lines, transmission lines. Lubricate your fittings before you put them together, even if they're AN fittings, because you'll give that fitting every chance not to leak. Let me put the camera down. I'm going to grab that cool tube. I'm going to put it in place. I'm going to show you how everything kind of fits together now. All right, music update for you. Triumph. Lay it on the line. Here is the tube installed. So you can see it goes right through these 2 tubes here. So there's a tube here on the bottom, there's a tube here on the top. That hose or that tube sneaks right through there and it comes right out here just above the sway bar. Over here, let me get you in here. You can see how tight it is to that bar. So our brake line is right there and curves and back into the tube so it makes room for this tube. And then up here on the other end, you can see that 90 takes it straight in. Now, I could probably shorten this hose a little bit and get it away from the fitting down here, and I may still do that, but I wanted to put it in full strength basically, or full size, before I started cutting anything to make sure that it fit as it was intended before I started modifying anything, because I really want to give the parts that the customer bought every chance of going in the way they're supposed to go in before I go ahead and customize something and spend a bunch more of his money. So I'm probably going to put the radiator tunnel in here probably later today or tomorrow. I gotta get out of here. And then, as I said, I started working on the fuel lines. And so I've got the fuel lines down in there where I showed you. So they're right there. And I've still got to mark them for feed in return. But back here at the back of the car, I never showed you this bracket that I made, and I still have to put a rubber bushing in here. So my rubber bushing is going to be nothing more than a piece of 3/8 hose. That'll keep this nice and snug so it won't move. I've just got it in with some Colecos right now. You can see we had it powder coated black to match the chassis. And our fuel lines, I think I've shown you these before when we did the fuel lines, what, a year ago? This is our return, this is our supply. Everything's strapped, nice and neat, goes towards the front of the car, straight lines. And I think we're pretty good on our fuel lines right now. So now that the fuel lines are in and kind of done, and I'm gonna have the fuel hoses made, then we're pretty much ready to start covering this stuff up in the back. I will keep it removable probably with just some Colecos for now, because what I want to do is I want to get some fuel in there, in the tank, and I want to pressurize the lines to make sure I don't have any leaks there. I also want to get some brake fluid in the masters and re-bleed the entire brake system to make sure this line that I put in here in the front is leak free. But that's where we're at today. I don't even know what direction I'm going in tomorrow. Like I said, I could be mounting the radiator tunnel and then starting it on the radiator. But again, I think I'm just going to, on that stuff, I'm just going to put it in with as few Colecos as I can in order to get the radiator fit. Make sure our fan's going to fit, because if the fan doesn't fit, I do have a backup for that. And then once I'm sure everything's going to fit in there, then I can start putting the radiator tunnel in like permanently, putting in all the pop rivets and whatnot and getting it ready to go so that we can fit the radiator, fit our condenser for the AC and all that stuff too. So bunch of stuff needs to get done, and lately a bunch of stuff ain't getting done. So I'm hoping that hopefully we're turning the corner here. Boz Skaggs, low down. I brought you back because I'm just getting ready to go in. It's about 6:45, and I got the horn mounted again. I couldn't mount it in the same spot, but I did. You know, it's a little trick that might work for you guys. If you make a hole in the wrong spot, sometimes if the hole is small enough, you can just put a pop rivet in it, right? Especially if it's colored pop rivet, you know, black pop rivet on black powder coated frame, they disappear. But I couldn't do that here because the hole was too big. So I took a stainless steel button head. I put it through the hole that we drilled for the horn over here, because obviously the horn's not going to fit here anymore. Then I just put a stainless steel nut, locking nut, so it has a nylon lock in it, and a stainless steel washer in it, and it's good. I needed to find another place to put the horn, and since I don't have any cooling tubes going through on this side, I figured, well, I'd see if I could get it to fit over here. And I think it's going to even work better, because now the horn is facing straight down, so it'll be good and loud. It'll echo off the ground, and it should work perfectly here, other than the fact that I have to extend the horn wires, because they're only this long and they're right here. So I'm probably going to snip these, extend the wires. I'll carefully route the wires down here, across, and then down here, then across, and then into the horn, because the terminals are right here in the back of the horn. So I've got the horn mounted, and I did have to put a spacer in right here so that the bell on the compressor portion of the horn didn't hit the frame. But other than that, it went right in, no problem. I think what I'm going to probably do tomorrow when I get out to the shop is figure out this sway bar, because if you remember, the end link's not hooked up on this side and there's a missing spacer. And then on the other side of the car, it's not connected. The spacer and the, let's see if I can get it over here. The spacer and the bolt are right there. So I got to figure this out. I got to see if I've got the material here to make a spacer, and if I do, I'll make one and get the sway bar set up. But remember, when you do your alignment and your corner weighting, you really want to disconnect your sway bar. Not so much for the alignment, but I do the alignment and the corner weighting pretty much all in the same weekend, or really close to one another. And so make sure that you disconnect one end. You don't need to disconnect both sides. It's just the wheels need to act independently when you set them up on the scales in order to get a true reading. So you want to make sure you disconnect the sway bar, both on the front and the back. But I think that's going to do it for today. I'm going to go in and get some lunch. Sorry. That's going to do it for today. I'm going to go in and get some dinner, and I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. All right, 2 days later, and we're getting a break in the heat. It's dropped about I don't know, 10, 15 degrees. We're down in the upper 80s. It's hovering around 90 degrees. Nothing. It's not hot. It's warm. I took the morning. It's Saturday. I took the morning and I did an oil change on the Workbench, and what a freaking disaster that was. You know, it's my own fault because I lowered the truck, and therefore you have to jack the truck up with a floor jack, and you got to put a jack stand underneath it to get under the truck to change the oil. I'm not complaining about it. I knew damn well when I did this that, you know, that's the price I was going to have to pay for maintenance on the truck. But today was especially disastrous because there was just, I had put a pan underneath the truck. Not a pan, a piece of fiberglass reinforced panel, FRP, to catch the oil. And I guess in my mind I thought it was going to do the same thing as a piece of cardboard, and it doesn't. So any oil that, you know, had accumulated on the truck and, you know, wanted to drip off hit the FRP. Well, the difference between the FRP and the cardboard is the cardboard will absorb the oil, the FRP doesn't. And so once it hits the FRP, it just runs right off onto the concrete. And I pulled the FRP out of the way, and the concrete was just, you know, soaked in oil. Now, I don't know where the oil's coming from because, again, I checked the dipstick tube this time, and it's still tight. So all I'm thinking is that, you know, and I've said this before, diesels just seem to sweat oil. The oil level is fine. It was still right where I left it. It was right at the midpoint of the full level, so it might have been down like a half a quart or something, but nothing excessive. But yet under the truck was just a freaking disaster. And I got oil on my arms, I got oil in my hair. So I don't know. But I've got all my oil changing materials here. I filled up the oil pan. The oil pan holds about 14, 15 quarts, and it's pretty full right now. I changed the filter, got a new filter in it, and replaced it with some 1540 multi-weight oil, because that's what the Ford manual calls for. And I've said this before, you know, I put the 12 quarts in that it says in the owner's manual for this thing. And I started the truck up. I pulled it out to clean the mess up underneath the truck, because obviously we're also leaving in a few weeks for our trip. And so I'm doing this all in preparation for our trip. And I cleaned up all the mess underneath the truck. I just used standard kitty litter, and I grind it into the concrete to get the oil, you know, up out of the concrete. And I got that all done. But I just while I was doing that, I just had the truck out in the yard here idling, and I let it idle for a good 20-25 minutes, and brought the thing up to temp, and everything looks good. It's not leaking any oil while it's running, but those 12 quarts, I'm going to check it tomorrow when I'm out here, and I'll bet you that it shows low on the dipstick, and I'm going to have to add like 2 quarts to bring it up to what the dipstick reads as full. So it's not real clear in the owner's manual whether that's 12 quarts with a filter or without, and whether you need to fill the oil in the oil filter. So I don't know. I'm going to fill it till the dipstick says it's full. So that's where I'm at out here. That's where what I did this morning. And this afternoon, I went back to work on the coupe, and I've done some things. I've got some battery cables out because I want to start working on the high amperage cable and power systems in the car. But I've got the steering shaft, the lower shaft and the intermediate shaft back in the car, because quite honestly, they've been out of the car for quite some time, because we were fussing around with a bunch of stuff in here, including the brake lines and these cool tubes, and it was just easier to have them out of the way. I pulled it out when I was working on all this stuff inside the foot box because it was in the way of the accelerator pedal and everything that we were doing inside there. So it's back in. I still have the upper shaft out because I'm dealing with a local machinist right now, trying to get him up to speed on our turn signal hubs, because that's just turned into a freaking nightmare. And I'm gonna see if I can have him step in and take over, because right now we're just completely stopped on all turn signal orders, and it's uncalled for, because I was told that this was all going to take a couple of weeks, and it's turned into 3 months. Basically, we put everything in place back on December 9th, and today is March 20th, March 21st. So you do the math, that's 3 months. That's not a couple of weeks. And I'm just tired of all the excuses. But so I got that, I'm starting on the cables, and I got the lower shaft in. I've also got the one of the ground cables started, but I had to order some eyelets. So I have some 3/8 eyelets, which are fine because I've got a 3/8 stud right here. But up here I need a number 8 eyelet for this number 4 ground cable that we're going to run right here. And I had to order those just now. So I got the cable half done, and I sent a list over to the car owner, and on that list was our negative battery cable, which is going to go from this ground over to our battery that's going to sit on that tray. And then I sent him a link to some other parts that we needed. One part was for the T56 that's in this thing to initiate the reverse lockout. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to wire that into the brake switch, so it'll get power and ground from the brake switch. So when he pushes the brake switch, it'll allow it to go into reverse easier, so we won't have to muscle it in. And the chances of you hitting the brake pedal and trying to put it in reverse at 60 miles an hour are slim to none. But when you're trying to get it in reverse, because of this, the way this T56 is, it has a electronically controlled plunger that is a safety for it not to go into reverse when you're in a forward gear moving forward. So he's got that ordered. I had him order a oil cap, because the one that we have in there now is just this generic Stant cap, and I just had him order the stock Ford one because it will at least match our coolant overflow cap, because that's a Ford piece. So he's got that. And then what else was there? I sent him a link to a battery, but I think he's gonna mull it over for now. I found one on Rock Auto that seemed reasonable, and it's gonna fit on our battery tray, but I'll leave that up to him. And then, I also worked on the sway bar. I got the sway bar all squared away on the front. So let me raise this thing up and I'll show you what I did to fix what was done previously for the front sway bar. All right, our music update is Dire Straits, Down by the Waterline. I was supposed to have a prospective customer stop by this morning, and he no-showed on me. He did end up sending a text, but I had kind of geared my day around his visit this morning, and when he didn't show up, it just threw my day in a tailspin. Maybe that's why I had so much trouble with the oil change, I don't know. But down here, we've got the sway bar all ironed out. So I managed to find a spacer, because I was missing this spacer, had the bolt and the nut, and I ended up adding a washer right here. Now normally I wouldn't add a washer, but I needed to take up some of the space because this bolt seems extremely long, and I didn't feel like cutting it. So I added a washer, and now the length is reasonable. I'll go over these sway bars at a different time when I'm installing them on another car, because to go into detail in this particular video is going to take too long. But I think a lot of guys have a hard time getting the sway bars in the right way, and it frustrates them, and then they end up like hammering the pieces together, and you don't want to do that. Quick explanation, I add a bigger spacer in between the mount for the coilover here and the Heim joint before I put the bolt on. So Factory 5 gives you this thin little spacer, and I don't think it gives the rod end enough articulation, and I think that's where a lot of guys run into problems because they're not able to line both sides up. You know, either this hole is too far away or this hole is too far away, and so you find you can't get the Heim joint to move far enough out to get in the right spot. Another trick you can do if you want to adjust the length is you can add spacers behind your bushing right here. So behind this bushing bracket, you can add spacers back there. The problem with that is that this particular sway bar doesn't give you a flat plate to mount behind the sway bar mount. And so you'll have to manufacture your own plate to bring this sway bar out, and that will give you more adjustment over here. You'll be able to hit either the first hole here, or I was able to get the second hole. You can usually get the third hole, but you cannot get the fourth. You'd have to have really much longer end links on here to get to the fourth. And this is going to be the lightest setting. The farther you are back, the more leverage you create, and that's going to be a softer setting. The farther you go in is going to make a much more harsh ride between the two sides of the car, because the only thing the sway bar is really doing is it's holding those two sides of the car like parallel with one another. And so as this wheel wants to go up, like in a turn, if you're leaning, it wants to plant the car more because it's not allowing it to go up quite as it'll counteract a light spring in the front of the car, and so therefore you'll have flatter cornering. But I would prefer if we could have more adjustment on these sway bars, because you're really stuck with the way Factory 5 provides it, in that you're stuck with like the hardest two settings, meaning the stiffest two settings on the sway bar. In the back, it's even worse. And the only reason I'm going to go back here is to show you that and point it out. You really can't get anything other than the hardest setting, the most firm setting on this rear sway bar because of the way they mount it in the car. They can't push it forward any, because then they're going to start getting into one of the control arms right here. But back here, you could actually make these rod ends longer and put them at more of an angle to get farther back and go with a lighter setting. The other thing they could have done is they could have made these brackets back here a little bit longer so that the brackets are more in line with center adjustment of the rear sway bar. So I don't know what engineering or calculations they went to in order to find this setting on the sway bar, but in my opinion, you should always start soft and work your way to the most stiff setting. You really don't have a choice here in the back. It's the firmest setting, and that's it. You'd be hard pressed even to get it to go to the next hole and still allow it to articulate enough, because the sway bar end link is so short in the way they have you set this up in the directions. So I don't know. When I set my own car up, I made sure that I had as much adjustment on my sway bar and in the rear so that I could make the two ends of the car match. These are kind of matched in that they're both almost on the hardest or most firm setting, but I don't know, like I said, where they've got the calculation or where they came up with the calculations on these sway bars and how close they are, how closely matched they are. So I think that's going to do it for today. I will check in with you tomorrow. I think I'm going to bring Slytherin out, and I may even bring Slytherin in the shop to do an oil change, but we'll see. It's supposed to be the coolest day of the week tomorrow, and so that's why I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it out in the main shop. So I will check in with you guys tomorrow. All right, everybody, it's next day, and if we take a quick look around the shop, things have changed. We have the coupe up on the left. So the coupe is up there. And we've got the Decades Cobra pushed underneath. And the reason that these are just both in here now is the fact that we're getting ready for a trip. And so out here in the main shop, look who made it inside the shop. So I'm getting Slytherin its yearly maintenance this week. I'm probably just going to put the car up on jack stands and do all of my service work with it up on jack stands. As much as I would love to put it on the lift and make things easy on myself, I think this is actually going to be less work than having to move both of those other cars out of the workshop and then put Slytherin up, bringing both of those cars back in, and then moving everything around again when I'm done. So this way I can kind of take this entire week, get under Slytherin, do a complete nut and bolt, take the wheels and the tires off, check all of the brakes, the brake linings, and everything in the wheel wells, go ahead and then do an oil change and get the car cleaned up. In about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 hours, when it cools off a little bit, I'm going to push it outside, start it up and take it outside, back it outside. How about that? And get some pictures of it for the insurance company, and then I'll bring it back in here and probably work on getting it up on some jack stands over the next day or two. But there you go. That's why we are moving things around the shop right now. As I said before, I got the oil changed in the Workbench yesterday, so it's all ready to go. I topped off the oil this morning. I did go online and I typed into the artificial intelligence and asked what the proper amount of oil is supposed to be in a 95 Ford Power Stroke. And the AI came back with 14.3 quarts with an oil filter change. So that's what I put in it, and I'll be damned, it came right up to the full level. Now other sources online said it was 15 quarts. So that would have made me overfill it by about a half a quart. And honestly, I'd rather run it a half a quart low than a half a quart too high. So we're gonna leave it at the 14.3. It's right where it needs to be on the dipstick right now, and I think everything's gonna be good. I'm gonna end this video here. I'm gonna pick right back up, probably tomorrow night, with my yearly maintenance routine on Slytherin. So tune back in next week, and that's basically what I'm gonna be working on. I'm gonna go through Slytherin from front to back, nut and bolt every fitting that's basically visible on the undercarriage of the car and in the engine bay. And I'm gonna get all that stuff squared away so that it's all ready for the trip. If you're enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.